All right, so welcome to everyone. It is 1 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Today you are attending Physical Activity and Health, Family Fitness, Meal Planning, and Conversations. And this session will be led by the incomparable Dr. Ken Wesson. I've had the pleasure of attending a few of his sessions so far, and I've learned so much, so we're so glad that you're here. My name is Monica, and I will be your host today, and my role is to serve you in the chat. So if there are things that you need, questions that you have, I'll be primarily monitoring that and serving as your back channel help for anything that you might need. But I want to officially welcome you on behalf of CAAASA, UCLA, CCEE. This is our Advancing Equity in an Era of Crisis webinar series. The California Association of African American Superintendents and Administrators, CAAASA, and the University of California, Los Angeles Center for the Transformation of Schools put this project together to support equity in virtual learning as we all shelter in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This work has been made possible by the generous support of the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, known as CCEE. We are grateful for their partnership on behalf of California's K-12 public school students. At the end of today's session I will have a survey link that I will drop in the chat for you to evaluate our time together. And even if you are watching this later on the extended session website, we also would love for you to complete that survey as well. I'll drop that link as soon as I'm finished, and also again at the end. One thing that I would tell you about the chat box is that we want to hear your questions, see your questions. If you are using the chat, please feel free to set it at all panelists and attendees, because if you just set it at all panelists, only I will see your comments. We want everyone to see your comments and your questions. So be sure that it's set that way. And if you find that you have a question about today's session that isn't addressed in today's session, we hope that you will also come to the extended session site, and there is a button for follow-up questions at the bottom of the page at equitableLearning.crisis.extendedsession.com. I can put that in the chat as well. The button for this session is right below today's title, just below the title, and it says session, and there's going to be a picture there, and you will see it. Click it. If there is a question you have, feel free to drop it there. Also, if you are interested, we normally have questions around whether or not you will get the materials and the slides from this session. Dr. Wesson will speak to this a little bit more, but everything is going to be housed on the extended session site after this session is over. And again, we thank you for attending. And at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Ken Wesson so that he can start our learning for today.
Thank you very much, Monica. Today, we're going to talk about physical activity and health, and the importance of family fitness, and also something we seldom get to talk about, and that's the importance of meals and conversations together. Most of us grew up in families where we did sit down for dinner together, and that is something that's been lost on today's youth. Can you see the screen?
We can still see it. We see your header slide right now. And okay, there we go.
Okay, terrific. So our goals for today are to understand the importance of and the long-term benefits of physical health and movement. And oftentimes we tell kids to sit still. And what we find is that when kids sit still, it's actually more difficult for them to learn. We find that the brain does far better learning when we have opportunities to move, and we'll discuss that. But this is physical activity for both ourselves and our kids. With the COVID-19, most of us are at home, and most of us have gotten somewhat relaxed. But we can't ignore the importance of physical activity and exercise. Second, we'll examine some of the more prominent health challenges that we face as we shelter in place. And one of them happens to be managing technology, because there are consequences for becoming too involved with technology. And how do we address those health risks? And we believe that now is an optimal time for us to re-examine some of our daily health practices, including how we eat, what we eat, when we exercise, and what we do in terms of sleep. And last, discuss how to take advantage of the time together by building stronger family bonds through having meals together and engaging in mealtime conversations again, and learn about the long-term benefits of doing so. First, we'll talk about movement. For the past 2 centuries, the most dominant model for education has been what we call sit and get, where students sit and they get knowledge from us. We've always believed, and we learned from the colleges of education, that moving is moving and thinking is thinking, but the twain shall never meet. And we believe that one of the best ways for kids to learn is by incorporating movement, and you'll see why in just a moment. The research shows that there's a strong connection between movement, physical activity, and cognitive enhancement. And moving and learning are correlative. The more students move within a certain range, the better they're able to learn. We ask the question, is physical activity a frill or is it fundamental? And we say that it's fundamental because it's an effective strategy for enhancing cognition, because it strengthens learning, it improves memory and retrieval, and most importantly, it boosts motivation. Many kids are not motivated to learn primarily because they're lethargic. But when kids have the body-brain activated, they're oftentimes ready to learn and motivated to do so. What we find is that before COVID-19, only 1/3 of K-12 students took part in daily physical activity or physical exercise, and it's lower for schools with more students at risk. And the lower you go in terms of grades as you move up from K to 12, the amount of exercise that students engage in daily continues to decrease. So we ask, why should we be concerned? The reason why we're most concerned is we know that exercise fuels the brain with oxygenated blood. And it's the oxygenated blood that delivers all of the nutrients and the neurotrophins. And the neurotrophins are basically chemical packages that help deliver what we call the fertilizer that helps brain cells connect. And it's those brain cells that connect that build circuits and pathways inside the brain that foster all learning. But students who don't exercise, they suffer some tremendous liabilities. Pardon me. What we find is that today's children are the very first generation ever to have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. In the past, kids were almost guaranteed to live longer than their parents. Today, that has been reversed. And it's because 2 out of 3 students don't meet the recommended physical activity guidelines. And 10 million more Americans today lead sedentary lives than a decade ago. Even more importantly, and we're finding this to be true in most middle school and high schools in particular, and that's where our greatest concern is, and that is that almost 32% of our students and our children and adolescents are overweight or obese. And it's the obesity that concerns us the most. And so we ask, well, what are the causes of obesity? Well, obesity is basically the sedentary lifestyle of inactivity, and it's among the top health risks for developing obesity, well, among the top health risks for developing obesity and heart disease. Inactivity is devastating to the human body. Our body was designed to move. And at any age, regular activity decreases the probability of obesity and heart failure. And this is one of the downsides to the at-home learning, and that is the excessive use of technology. We use technology for communication, for work, for school, for fun, for games, but when we're engaged in technology, we're usually inactive. That means we're consuming calories but not burning them off while sitting or laying down. We even find that technology interferes with social interactions. Here's what we see quite commonly: kids together, kids at games, kids supposedly sharing a dinner together, but they're involved with the technology, not with one another. Albert Einstein said, "I fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction. The world will have a generation of idiots." I'm not saying our students are idiots, but much of their behavior today suggests that Albert Einstein may have been right, because if they're not idiots, they're certainly beginning to encounter mental health problems. Among the negative effects of technology are the effects on mental health. There's something now called the Internet Addiction Disorder, and it's recognized as a mental health disorder by the DSM-5. And this is the Handbook for Diagnosing Mental Illness. And we now categorize excessive overuse with technology as one of those mental health disorders. And it results in excessive weight gain, lost muscle tone, skin pores, low physical flexibility, and even blood clots. The blood clots are also quite scary because they promote strokes. But all of these are consequences of decreases in physical movement. There's also another syndrome called the computer vision syndrome. And this is what occurs, and it may be happening to some of you today, and particularly from being home. It's called computer vision syndrome. And this is the burning irritation that you get from extended periods of looking at a computer screen. And we find that people who spend a lot of time working with technology have a tendency to blink their eyes less than they would under normal circumstances. They also experience back problems, neck problems, shoulder problems, and muscular development problems with young children who spend an excessive amount of time with technology. But the biggest problem is the impact on vision. Again, with the effects of the mental health effects of technology, we find that people who spend a lot of time at home on technology, their sleep patterns are being disrupted. They're experiencing depression at 6 times the normal rate. This is a form of addiction, and people who are engaged with technology are 4 times more likely to become addicted to using technology than people who do not. We're now seeing more stress 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we work on a computer at work. We drive home and use a cell phone. Once we get home, we're back on the computer again with very little or no downtime. And once again, our eyes are locked on the computer screen, which impacts our vision and ability to see. There's also something called Fomo, and some of you may have heard of that, and that's the fear of missing out. And this is why, pardon me, adolescents and high school students in particular are constantly on Instagram and constantly on their cell phone because they don't want to miss out on what's happening with their friends. Isolation. We find that people spend a lot of time with technology because we call this the myification of human experience, where we're focused on my music, my information, my connections, but it's all focused on me, and they're disconnected from other people. And we say the isolation is connected to personal technology, but not to personal touch. We see far more incivility with the use of technology. We see more online rudeness and bullying. And this is what led to many of the school shootings that we've seen in middle schools and high schools throughout the country. We also see the insecurity. And technology is promoting insecurity primarily because people look at what other people are doing. Other people seem to be having more fun. They have their glamour shots, and then compared to our daily routines, their lives look a lot more glamorous than ours. But their lives aren't any more glamorous. If we just isolated our glamour shots, we'd look as glamorous as they do. But it creates anxiety where people think, I'm not as glamorous, I'm not as creative, I'm not as well connected, I'm not as smart, I'm not as talented, I'm not as artistic as other people, primarily because we, again, see them at their best and compare that to our mundane experience of daily life. There are also negative effects of technology on physical health. And what we find is that most obesity begins to occur between the ages of 5 and 6 and peaks during adolescence with the onset of puberty. And children who become obese at the early ages have an 80% chance of becoming obese as an adult and remaining obese for their entire lifetime. It becomes a lifestyle, and a very unhealthy lifestyle. The causes of obesity are oftentimes psychological, where people begin to consume food for pleasure, for comfort, for enjoyment, to fix emotional problems, but not exclusively to stay alive for sustenance. Less than 1% of childhood obesity is caused by medically related problems or physical problems. Most are just from consuming more calories than kids happen to burn. Heredity and family lifestyle contribute, and a child with one obese parent has a 45 to 50% chance of becoming obese as a child, as an adult. And with two obese parents, there's an 80% chance of becoming obese as an adult. It's the lifestyle, it's what kids see, how parents model, that become the lifestyle of choice, and sometimes the lifestyle by circumstance. The health risks of obesity. Obese individuals are typically prone to one or more of the following health complications, and there are three. One is toddler obesity, and that's becoming obese within the first 4 years of life. And toddler obesity is linked to low IQ and to cognitive delay. Many kids who struggle with weight also struggle with learning. There's an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and other cardiac illnesses, which causes more death to Americans of both sexes and across all of the racial and ethnic lines. And there's something that is worthy of our attention today, and that there's a significant health disparity. And because women and people of color are treated at a lesser rate for heart disease than Caucasian men. And even when we have high quality health care insurance, we find that we receive lower health care than our white counterparts, particularly when it comes to cardiovascular issues. Many African Americans suffer from high blood pressure, and far more than any other ethnic group. And that's another one of the important risks of heart disease. It can be combated by exercise and diet, but there are also some circumstantial issues that contribute to hypertension in African Americans. One question has been raised, and that is high blood pressure, hypertension, is that genetic or is it sociological? Because African Americans are required to navigate institutional racism all day, every day. And it's that added stress that contributes to heart disease. African Americans are also 8 times more likely to develop kidney failure than whites. And this is because the adrenal glands produce cortisol, and cortisol is one of the most dominant stress hormones. But the adrenal glands are located on the top of each kidney. And this is what produces stress, or our stress response. But we ask the question, why do some people lose their appetite when they're depressed, while other people eat more? And we have no answer to that question, except it sometimes falls back on the kinds of role models they've seen over life through family and parents. Another health risk to obesity is heart failure, and black men and women develop the symptoms for heart failure earlier than any other group in America, and we die more frequently from heart failure. And part of the contributing factors include that we're 2.5 times more likely to have high blood pressure than any other ethnic group, which contributes to heart failure and stroke. And if we look at blood pressure, high blood pressure, and stroke, you see African Americans are typically far more represented than any other ethnic group as individuals who are afflicted with these type of ailments, including diabetes. And what we find is that African Americans are among the highest rate of any age group for diabetes. Regardless of age, our rates are higher. African American females have higher rates of the risk factors for heart disease, including diabetes, hypertension, obesity, physical inactivity, and metabolic syndrome than their Anglo counterparts. And Latinas are more likely to be diabetic and physically inactive and overweight compared to their Anglo counterparts. But of all women, 1/3 of them fail to recognize that these are risks of heart disease. For adolescent obesity, the most common factors contributing happen to be the lack of exercise and temporary or lifestyle sedentary activity or inactivity. And we find that this decreases brain volume, but exercise contributes to increasing the physical sides of the brain by contributing to what's called angiogenesis and neurogenesis, the production of more brain cells and more blood vessels in the brain. Another important cause of adolescent obesity is overeating or binging. It's not binging on healthy foods, it's binging on unhealthy foods on a regular basis. And now that kids are home more kids are on Netflix and the other streaming videos and eating more unhealthy foods, binging, pardon me. And we see more of these consequences beginning to occur. Stressful events, including COVID-19, cause people to eat more sweet and salty foods, the comfort foods. And this is another contributing factor to childhood obesity and adolescent obesity. Low self-esteem drives kids to the comfort foods, and depression, or what's called stress eating, or eating your emotions away. We find that more kids are doing so, which leads to childhood obesity. We ask, well, what can be done to combat adolescent obesity, childhood obesity? And the first most important thing is to get a medical evaluation with a pediatric physician or a general practitioner. And if there's no physical cause, then take a closer look at the eating habits. And fastest and easiest thing to do is to consume fewer calories, but also to learn how to enjoy healthier foods. In Copenhagen, physical education was added to the school day each morning, and this included hip hop, dancing, aerobics, swimming, rowing. But more importantly, all junk food was removed and only healthy foods were served in the school. And as a result, absenteeism decreased, concentration in the classroom improved by 33%, GPA improved by 1.5, and positive classroom behaviors increased, and there were fewer referrals to the principal or the headmaster's office. Behavior improved so dramatically. Just by doing nothing more than changing diet, you change behavior, you change the student's ability to learn. And this is partially why many schools now are offering breakfast, lunch, and or dinner for students who don't have the financial wherewithal, now that schools are closed, to get meals on a regular basis. The benefits of physical activity for kids are that we can incorporate physical activity in our academic lessons, and it improves standardized test scores. Movement has a significant decrease on out-of-seat negative behaviors and off-task behaviors. And research tells us that 85% of our kids are actually kinesthetic learners, which means they learn by touching and moving, which tells us that even at home, the best lessons that we can plan are lessons that involve movement and touching objects. And it's recommended that kids get at least 60 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous exercise. And now that they're at home, we have opportunities to actually take them to the park for them to play in ways that they sometimes did not have an opportunity or time to do so. The neurological benefits and physical benefits of exercise are that it increases circulation, it increases the oxygenated blood that goes to the brain, and this actually improves not just cognition, but decision-making, as well as learning and memory. If we wanted kids to make better decisions, to think better, exercise and nutrition play important roles. Exercise also improves muscle strength, or muscle tone, strength, endurance, energy. And when kids decrease body fat, we find that their self-esteem improves, which causes obesity to decrease, which decreases their tension, anxiety, and depression. They look fit, they feel better about themselves, and the positive social feedback and compliments makes a tremendous difference in helping kids overcome obesity. In Napier, Illinois, middle school and high school students now have 30 minutes of physical activity before they begin the school day. And what they found is, once again, many of the same types of results as they found in Copenhagen, Denmark. And they found most importantly was that being physically active gave kids a cognitive advantage in the classroom. Even corporations, pardon me, even corporations are recognizing the benefits of activity, and they now have corporations with desks attached to treadmills where employees can actually work and walk at the same time. We've also found through research that exercise with rats increased the number of not just brain cells, but also the amount of blood that can flow through the brain by simply giving rats opportunities for exercise. And we found the same thing with human beings. So we recognize that there's an important connection between nutrition, health, and cognition, just as there is with exercise. And changing the diet will change behavior, but also change a child's ability to learn. And this is by simply adding more lean proteins, vitamin and mineral supplements, having nibbling diets with fruit, decrease the simple sugars, eating the colorful vegetables, increasing the omega-3 oils. These are what we get from fish, primarily things like salmon, and decreasing animal fats from beef, and then avoiding high fructose corn syrup. Unfortunately, the corn syrup is in almost every product that we get from fast food. Meals and conversation. And this is what we're leading to. The most important thing that you can learn while at home is getting reconnected to the value of family time. And this is family time at meals. Research tells us that our earliest ancestors walked 12 to 14 miles a day in search of food. And this is from where we got the concept of hunters and gatherers, but they were hunting primarily for survival. But with the advent of living in large groups, human beings began to share the game brought back by the hunters. But food was typically scarce, but when food was plentiful, it became the centerpiece for all celebrations. And this was the time when human beings would overeat, and there weren't too many times when they had that opportunity. And this led to celebrations, and even our Thanksgiving is a celebration because it's a feast, celebrating the fact that there is not a scarcity of food. Even when we celebrate today, food plays a major role. When there is a promotion, a high school graduation, an anniversary, we all go out and celebrate by eating and drinking. But today, there's no scarcity of food, but mealtime is becoming a rare shared experience. We dine alone and we eat hastily just to eat, and we move on and get back to our computers. But for many, meal times with the family get lost because of our schedules. We have heavy school schedules, heavy work schedules. We have extracurricular activities after school, and we have little time to plan meals together. And we'll go weeks without sitting down to share a meal with members of our families. But sharing the meal with family is not just a celebration of the food, it's a celebration of life together. But a family meal should be considered a daily requirement. And as we shelter in place, we should plan at least one family meal per day together. Family meals together yield very positive results. We find that families that eat together are not just healthier, but they're happier. And psychologists tell us that families should cook together, should eat together, should talk together, and make mealtime family time, where we communicate together, share ideas, share goals, share aspirations, share our lives. And this is also a time when you're able to help your child make healthy choices regarding not just food, but exercise and decrease the risk of obesity in children and teenagers by simply having opportunities to talk about the foods that you eat together. Because family meals are more nutritious. A Harvard study found that families that eat together were more likely to have kids who eat vegetables and fruits than families who eat alone. And kids who eat the family meals tend to eat a wider variety of foods and become less picky eaters. And I think almost every family has a picky eater, but having family time together is one of the ways in which you can circumvent the recurrence of those issues with picky eaters. Family meals together should be a time when families prepare the meal. And research tells us that families that prepare the meals together, the meals are more nutritious than the kind of meals we eat when we dine out. And takeout dinners seldom have the same nutritional value as a home-cooked meal. And most restaurants, you'll find, have a very high amount of fat, salt, and sugar that they place into their foods. That's what gets you to eat more, but also that's what gets you to drink more. And they make as much money from the drinks as they do from the foods, even though they serve fewer drinks than they do food. The meals together also encourage healthy eating. Once your child leaves home and goes to college or begins to live on their own, the healthy practices that they learned at home are the healthy practices that they'll later engage in once they leave the home. Equally important, eating at home saves money. It's cheaper to cook meals at home than it is to dine out, and you not only get better food, but you also get better company when you eat at home. Family meals together also allow time for family members to strengthen their ties, to build better child-parent relationships. But equally important, they build a sense of belonging. When kids feel that they belong in the family, they interact with one another, they entertain one another, and this is what builds better self-esteem. And equally important, eating helps your child develop a stronger sense of security. Most kids are not secure by knowing that mom and dad love them, but it's that mom and dad love each other. And when kids see those kinds of strong relationships and they see themselves tied to those relationships, that's what creates a sense of belonging. And some of you may recall Maslow's hierarchy, where love, and belonging were essential keys to personal development. We also find that African Americans need to eat more fruits and vegetables every day. And by eating at home, we find that more kids will consume the recommended daily allowances for fruits and vegetables, but they need guidance, they need role models, and this occurs through home meals. Family meals together are the best time for parents to become role models, where parents can set great examples for healthy eating, but also for table manners. Those of you who've left education periodically or before you, or perhaps were involved with corporations before you joined education, you may know that corporations, before anyone is ever hired, they oftentimes take that individual out to lunch or dinner. And it's during lunch and dinner that they observe their eating habits, but also their table manners. And if an individual has very poor table manners, oftentimes they're not hired because they know that those bad table manners are going to negatively influence customers. When children eat together in the family, they also learn correct portion sizes, food groups, and good nutrition. And one of the things that we recommend is that let children serve themselves at dinner and encourage them to take small portions at first and tell them if you want more, if you're still hungry, please take more. But let children learn how to gauge how much they need before they start eating. Oftentimes we pile food on the plate and then tell children, eat everything on your plate. This is again a contributing factor to childhood obesity. But taking small amounts, eating small amounts, and eating more when you're hungry is how we control the amount of food consumed. The recommendations we have for family meals together include making the meals a priority, and we say to focus as much on the time together as a family more than on the fact that you have a nice, elaborate, or fancy meal. It's the time that's more important. The relationships, eating together builds close interpersonal relationships, not just with parent and child, but also with siblings. And then it gives everyone a chance to learn more about each other. And that's only if you use the dinner time to talk, to connect, and make memories together. And that's when kids learn some of the lessons and the most valuable lessons that they'll use in life. And it's the conversations and storytelling that makes the dinners fun, but it also makes them memorable. Your kids will forget what they ate, but they will never forget the family stories that were told. And particularly when those stories are repeated. And kids will often ask during dinner, can you tell me the story about how you and mom met? And they love hearing those family stories. But this is part of what cements a family together. Critical recommendations for family meals together is to teach the responsibility, and that is by sharing the task of dinner making. Let kids come with you to shop for groceries. Let them plan the menu for the meal. Let them join you cooking the dinner. Let them join you serving the dinner, and also cleaning up after dinner. By making this all a family event, kids learn that dinner is everyone's responsibility, not just mom's. Also, occasionally you might want to re-examine the tasks that have been assigned and reassign those tasks and agree upon new tasks for new people. Also, rotating those tasks is extremely helpful. But when dinner is an event where everyone contributes, no one individual feels resentful or overburdened that preparing the meal is their responsibility and no one else's. Even young children can play a role. They can do something as simple as sprinkling the seasoning, pouring the dressing, rinsing the vegetables, helping to clear the table, pouring drinks. But doing so, giving kids compliments for the job they've done Many times that may be the only compliment that child has gained the entire day. It's a great way to teach not just responsibility, but how we work with one another and teach civility. And also work as a family, cleaning up afterwards. And as you see in the lower right-hand corner, this was the old model of how men and women navigated the kitchen. In today's world, it's everyone helps, everyone contributes, and everyone benefits. And one of the last and most important aspects of family at home together, enjoying meals, is to turn off the TV and put away the cell phones. Research suggests that children tend to consume more calories and eat fewer vegetables and fruits when the TV is on during dinner. And families that eat dinners in front of the TV will notice that it interferes with the pleasure and benefit of being together, sharing time, pardon me, sharing the family stories and sharing conversations. And so we say, turn off the TV and do not answer the cell phone during family meals. And by doing so, you'll find that your family will be closer, they'll eat better, you'll decrease childhood obesity, but also you'll become a stronger knit family. And last, research suggests that the family meals together, when you have conversations with your child, you begin to understand them better. They begin to share the kinds of problems they're having. You can share with them some possible solutions. Younger children hear problems that older children may have and begin thinking about what are the kinds of resolutions to those problems that I can anticipate while I'm slightly younger. Consequently, when children have meals with parents, they engage in fewer risky behaviors as they get older. They use drugs less, they engage in violence less, they consume alcohol less, and they have fewer psychological problems throughout a lifetime. And this is one of the most important and a tremendous benefit of having those shared meals together. I save time for us to engage in answering questions and engage in more conversation. But if everyone will just take about 2 minutes and write down, why is it important for parents and educators to refocus on health practices while students are sheltering at home? And what was the most valuable idea that you learned along those lines this afternoon? And then, as we always do, Dr. J. Suso Parker said an important distinction has to be made between knowing something and knowing what it's good for. And this is why I always ask people to write down 2 I will statements, and that is, how will you use the information shared today at your home with your students who are now all online? And if you can share those with Monica, she can share those with me.
Absolutely. So far you have, Becky is thanking you. She has to go to another meeting, but found it super helpful. Maria said that it's important to eat together as a family and turn off all of the technology, and others are typing.
Yeah.
I will say also that Larita shared a resource that I put in the chat from familyleadership.org. There is a family meals challenge that you may already know about, Dr. Wesson, but she said that if you go there, there are resources for families to have a meal challenge. So I'm going there to check that out myself. Let's see, Ophelia says, eating and exercising are valuable to social and emotional development. She will model social, emotional, healthy habits so that she can teach her children the value.
Yes.
Says,
and for many kids, it's not so much that you have to teach them. One of the best ways to teach them is through modeling and by exercising, taking them for walks, having them exercise or play games with you that are physical. kids have an opportunity to see the value, but also enjoy your company. And once again, this is the type of event that strengthens personal bonds.
Sure. And Ben said that for our minds to work, our body has to work first.
Yes,
um,
you need a healthy body in order for the mind to work in healthy ways. Now, in the past, we used to separate the body from the brain and would even conduct research on the body versus the brain without recognizing that that one influences the other. That the mind actually can turn on and off your immune system by mere thought. And
Absolutely.
as we look at all the kinds of ways, and it's an emerging field now called psychoneuroimmunology. That's on how the brain controls every other cell and system in the entire body. But the two work in tandem.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And you have another great comment. The COVID-19 pandemic is an opportunity in disguise to reconnect with healthy home food cooking and our oral tradition as human beings to gather ideas for our imagination.
Yes,
That is,
it's a silver lining. It's
yeah.
a silver lining for many of us. I have had in the past 2 months, I've had more dinners with my two sons, one in high school, one in college, than I've had with him probably in the last 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And we've had lots of conversations.
Yes. See, Rachel says that working on your physical health can help with mental health. And we were just talking about this. This is so important with our kids as they are separated from their friends. C. Brinson said, I will remind families during my weekly check-ins to have a goal of eating together at least twice a week.
Yeah.
That's a great, great
Well,
thing.
we say we should take small steps. The first step is twice a week, then 3 or 4 times a week, and then at least 5 times a week.
Yeah,
Ideally, one meal a day is what we want to have with our kids. It's probably the best time for a check-in because while eating, we're typically relaxed, and kids will share things with you that they wouldn't share otherwise. But having that one meal a day makes a difference.
absolutely. Connie thanks you. She said that she was fortunate to grow up without the technology of today, and all of their meals were sacred every evening. They loved it, and she remembers many of the stories her mom and dad told during those dinners they had together. Um, Jerry shares, I learned about the connection between 24/7 stress and high blood pressure. I will remember this as a factor in dealing with my students.
Yes,
Um,
and one of those 24/7 factors and stress has to do with the technology.
mm,
And when we can disconnect ourselves from the technology, we actually decrease some of that stress. The original goal of technology was to make our lives simpler and easier, and it's made our lives more complicated. It hasn't saved time. It's caused us to waste more time, which means we have less time.
right. And there are all these opportunities for us to connect, but as one of the slides pointed out, often we use technology to disconnect with the present. It made me think about one of my students who she was preparing for her Sweet 16 birthday party, and she shared her invitation. She said, Miss Washington, make sure that this is all grammatically correct. And it said, come to my Sweet 16 birthday party where there will be food, fun, and free Wi-Fi. I said, why do you have to say free Wi-Fi? And she said, well, who will come to my party without technology? And I thought, it's a party. But totally, they sat there at her 16th birthday party and didn't talk to each other. So yes.
Yes.
um,
How about lots of exciting people to meet?
yes. Let's see, Carolyn is thanking you for an excellent presentation. She always learns before you. It is Maslow before Bloom's. And I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, Juvenal Martinez. I will help my poor wife clean up in a more supportive fashion after dinner, and I will share cooking and food preparation ideas with my students.
Yes, well, I'm
Yeah.
with you, Juvenile. Since I've been home, I've in 20 years, I don't recall helping my wife with the dishes very often. Now, when we put the dishes away from the dishwasher, I take the dishes out, I hand them to my wife, and it's a shared, we do the dishes together. And
Yeah,
we've never done that before.
that's awesome. Let's see, and I know I probably wouldn't be able to read them all. You have about 22 new messages in here. Lisa thanks you. She will incorporate more self-care activities as a part of her assignments. For example, she says that she could have her students walk the block and go on a scavenger hunt, or walk and journal about what they've never noticed in their neighborhoods. That's a really great idea.
Yeah, oftentimes we see parents walking with toddlers in a stroller, and the parent will be on a cell phone. One of the best things you can do with your child, particularly young children, is to stop and make every walk an excursion, but also a learning event where you share with them, here's a leaf, here's a different type of leaf, here's a flower, this is a lily, that is a rose. Teaching the kid all of the kinds of things that you only appreciate if you stop and notice. It's like the old expression, stop and smell the roses. And we seldom do that.
Yes. See, Sandra says she'll make sure her son is moving for at least 60 minutes because she has learned that weight gain reduces the ability to learn. See, Francisca, we should be together and do healthy cooking, exercise more with the family. This means to be more as a family, not like we were at school. Loretta says she was shocked at the percentages of eight times more for African Americans to develop kidney failure. So was I when I saw that.
And we attribute that primarily to stress.
Oh, wow. Connie learned why it is important to know and understand how to eat well for adults and children, for all of us. Rachel wants to ensure family mealtime happens every night, and she will celebrate her students' accomplishments in new non-food ways. That's a good point, because I know in schools, a lot of times that is how we celebrate. It's like, who's bringing the cupcakes?
You can still celebrate with food, but just make it nutritional food. There are lots of great foods that you could bring. Nuts, celery, the sliced apples with ranch dressing, peanut butter. There are lots of ways to have some very fun meals that are not going to be high caloric.
Yeah, good deal. Let's see. Carla says that sheltering in place places different demands on the body, so we must adjust accordingly. This webinar brought to light what is obvious. Daily activity is critical to overall well-being. Technology has its pros and cons, and effort can mediate the cons.
Yes, well, unfortunately, we're discovering more cons to the technology. Technology is one of the best ways to store information, not so much to gather information anymore. We can capture information that's important, but there's a lot of junk and garbage on the internet, and that's what gets extremely time consuming.
Sure. Don is agreeing with Carla and saying that the most valuable thing learned today was that most obesity begins between the ages of 5 and 6. See, Jackie is agreeing that exercise is important. Catherine talks about togetherness. Ileana is thanking you, and CAAASA and me, you're welcome. I didn't do much. Says great presentation, very valuable information. She is from Valverde Unified School District. Let's see what else we have from anybody I haven't read from. Danielle says, thank you for the information. You have confirmed the information that we share with one another at our family leadership meetings. Family mealtime builds relationships and confidence in our kiddos. Leaders can be strengthened around the table. Leaders can be strengthened around the tables through your family values and not the TV or the streets.
Yeah, the mealtime is also a great time for kids to share ideas and examine ideas, to examine some of their own thinking. Some of the controversial issues that you may see on TV, bring those to the kitchen table and discuss them. If your child is mature enough, again, developmentally appropriate conversations is critically important. But having conversations about world events with your middle school and high school students, one of the best things kids can do. Oftentimes they listen to their peers rather than to adults in terms of guiding and shaping their thinking.
Yes. And let's see, Connie says that having a family walk is great for exercise, and it's useful for talking and exploring together as a family. Loretta agrees with that and says that having a pet can be motivation for people to exercise. Her dog won't let her sit too long before he has the leash in his mouth.
The only problem with that is that rain or shine, and particularly during rain, you have to take those pets out.
Yes. Yes, I have 2 big dogs. Let's see, Faniza, cooking and eating together is important. I learned to cook for my grandmother, so I agree with the value of being together. I did not consider how eating together can lessen children's risky behaviors.
Yes.
Yeah, see, Sandra said she was surprised to learn that today's children are the first generation to have a shorter life expectancy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The actuarial charts indicate that they won't live as long as we do, and it's primarily because of the risky behaviors.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
And of course, obesity and the kinds of contributing factors to heart failure.
Yes, absolutely. And Don has a question, and then there was a question earlier in the session that was right at the beginning that I'll share with you. But Don wants to know, what are your thoughts about this economic crisis? Our school administration is making drastic cuts, including cutting elementary PE as a whole. No PE in elementary. What do you think about that impact?
Well, PE is going to be cut K through 12, primarily because PE equipment is the equipment where kids are going to share. A ball that gets passed around among 20 children, that increases the probability of spreading COVID-19 20 times. And so we're going to see fewer manipulatives in class that we know are most important for developing learners. We're going to see fewer PE toys and tools used in schools because of the COVID-19. Hopefully, we'll come up with a cure, or we'll come up with a fast means by which we're going to disinfect schools. Right now, we're talking about more teachers because we may have to have staggered schedules because we won't have as many children in the classroom. We're going to also have to hire more custodians because classrooms are going to have to be disinfected on a regular basis. Even something as simple as cleaning every child's shoe before they walk into the school building is going to become a factor. So there are going to be new practices that we hadn't thought of before, all associated with disinfecting the school and the school environment in order to prevent the spread of disease. That may be something we'll do for the next 18 months to 24 months, but it's going to be something we'll have to do. Hopefully we'll resume and get back to the days when we actually have shared manipulatives, one of the best ways for young children to learn, and also PE equipment, where kids learn best. They learn many of their social skills, team building skills through physical education.
Absolutely. And I think you probably have answered this other question within that answer you just gave, but there was a question about whether there are considerations for taking this information and applying it to our after school programs as well. And I think, and if I'm not overstepping, if we're still having those programs within the school, then some of the things that you just shared, Dr. Wesson, would be some of the same practices that would happen in the after school setting as well.
Yes, after school settings, I just did a webinar for 7 states on the Eastern Seaboard for their after school programs. And one of the things they're looking at is how is it that you conduct after school programs in today's environment. But I said one of the most important things we have to make sure we do is do not eliminate movement. It's a movement and activity for children that helps to stimulate the brain. And by movement, you add as much as 15% more glucose to the brain, which actually fuels the brain and contributes to cognition. If you want to give your kids a 15% cognitive advantage, give them opportunities to move.
Oh, absolutely. And I thank everyone again for joining us. I just put in the chat again the link to the survey for this session. And again, if you're watching the recording, please also do the survey. And if there was a question that you didn't get answered, I think I pretty much went through everything everyone shared in the chat. But if something comes to you afterwards, remember that you can go to the extendedsession.com website and you will find there the materials. Click on this session and you can also ask a question there. And in that ask a question box, you'll be notified that someone will answer you within 24 hours. So feel free to use that, follow up there. We appreciate you taking the time to spend in this session today and learning and applying all of our new learning to our current situation that I think none of us thought we'd ever be in. But this has been so helpful to me. You're getting a lot of love in the chat again, Dr. Wesson. Yes, it says this was very beneficial. Thank you so much. This was great. So we thank you for being so active in the chat. And we hope that as you go forward with your students and with your families and all who you support, you remember these very valuable lessons that we learned today. So thank you all and have a fantastic afternoon. Dr. Wesson, I'll follow up with you in email too. Send you
Thank
something.
you so much, and everyone be healthy.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Be well.